At 33 minutes past 2 p.m., the National Assembly experiencing a lack of quorum this Tuesday afternoon. It is the 13th day of June 2017. If you are just joining us, you are watching live proceedings from the National Assembly. And once we do constitute the required numbers, a minimum 50, then members shall proceed to consider various issues that require their attention. And they are already clocking in to the chambers. As per your screen, the orderly is there taking count. And it is an afternoon where they are expected to consider three proposals that were brought to them last Thursday afternoon as regards a report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the second supplementary budget for the financial year 2016-2017. And it is after deliberations on these three proposals that this particular report can then proceed and be drafted into a bill for consideration in this very house before it adjourns Sendai this Thursday. The proposals are a 300 million shillings increment to the National Intelligence Service and the National Security Intelligence Program for security-related interventions, an increment of 2.5 billion shillings to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission and the Management of Electoral Processes Program for the initial payment of printing of ballot papers. And then there is the reallocation of 90 million shillings within the State Department of Arts and Culture, 50 million to go to the Kenya Film Commission, and 40 million to the Kenya Film Classification Board. These were proposals brought forth by the Chairperson, Budget and Appropriations Committee, Honorable Mutava Musimi, last Thursday, during which he sought approval from the House. And these proposals were committed to the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee, as well as the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee.
Very well, we can commence.
A quorum has been achieved this afternoon.
Order, members, order. We can commence. We can commence. There's quorum.
Yeah.
So we commence.
Yeah.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Order, members, those who are making their way, could you take your seats? Member for Karachuonyo. Order, members, order. Member for Kitutu Church North. Order, members, I wish to introduce to you a delegation of members of the Standing Committee on Appointments from the Parliament of the Republic of Uganda. The delegation is seated in the Speaker's row and comprises of the following. 1, the Honorable contend that a total of 930 hectares of land was excised from Mount Kenya Forest in Ontilili area in Meru for settlement of squatters. Further, the petitioners allege that after the conveyance process, the title deed of the Ontulili block of Mount Kenya was irregularly issued to an individual, instead being issued to an individual instead of being issued in favor of the squatters. The petitioners are therefore praying that the National Assembly investigates the allocation and ownership of Ontulili block of Mount Kenya, LR number 12234, and inquires into the matter of Ontulili squatters with a view to having the 100,435,000 families currently living in deplorable and inhuman conditions settled on excisions in Ontulili block of Mount Kenya, LR number 12234, gazetted as legal notice number 68/1975 and 107/1977. Honourable members, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 227, the petition stands committed to the Departmental Committee on Lands for consideration. In considering the petition, the committee is encouraged to engage the petitioners. I thank you. Next.
Order number 5, papers.
Leader of Majority.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Tuesday, June 13th, 2017. The Public-Private Partnership, in bracket, Project Facilitation Fund, Regulations 2017, and the explanatory memorandum. 2, the National Police Service Standing Orders and the explanatory memorandum. 3, the Office of the Controller of Budget, Half-Year County Government Budget Implementation Review Report for the financial year 2016-2017. 4, the report of the Auditor General on the financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year that ended 30th June 2016 and the certificate therein. And the institutions are as follows: Kenya Institute of Mass Communication, Coast Water Service Board, Kenya Maritime Authority, Railway Development Levy Fund Operation Account from the Ministry of Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development, Mechanical and Transport Fund from the same ministry, Lands Limited, ADC Corporation, ADC, Agricultural Development Corporation, Parliamentary Mortgage Scheme Fund, and lastly, Mr. Speaker, the Petroleum Development Levy Fund.
The Public-Private Partnership Projects Facilitation Fund Regulations 2017 and the National Police Service Standing Orders and the explanatory memorandum are referred to the Committee on Delegated Legislation, while the Office of the Control of Budget Half-Year County Government's Budget Implementation Review Report for the financial year 2016-2017 is referred to the Budget and Appropriations Committee. Honorable Cheboy.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Tuesday, June 13, 2017. The 5th report of the Procedure and House Rules Committee on amendments of the standing orders.
Very well. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Honorable Cheboy.
Honorable Speaker, that pursuant to Standing Order 264 and 265, this House adopts the report of the Procedure and House Rules Committee laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, June 13, 2017, and further approves and further, 1, approve the amendments proposed to the standing orders as contained in the schedule of the report. 2, resolve the amendments to the standing orders. Resolves that the amendments to the standing orders shall, upon approval by the House, take effect at the commencement of the next Parliament. And 3, in view of the amendments proposed in the standing order 212B, Committee on Members' Services Facilities resigned the decision of the House of 14th March 1967, which established the National Assembly Catering and Health Services Committee. Thank you.
Very well. Next order.
Order number 7, statements.
Member for Kiamba. Member for Kiamba. Honorable Paul Koinange. Member has submitted a statement pursuant to standing order number 43 and indicating that he desired to make the statement this afternoon. Deputy Majority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I second.
Honourable members, I propose a question, which is that the House do agree with the committee in the same report. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. As many of the contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Mover, Leader Majority. Move for third reading. No. Honourable members, the first step was for the House to agree with the committee or the whole House. Then we go back to the normal procedure.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 48 of 2016, be now read a third time. I also request Honorable Ashiali to second.
Honourable Ashiali.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I second.
Member for Karachonyo, you better take your seat. I think you have given an indication that you are tired with the House. Now, you must follow the rules. Honourable members, I therefore propose the question, which is that the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendments Bill, number 2, National Assembly Bill number 48 of 2016, be read a third time. Having confirmed that we have the quorum of members, I proceed to put the question, which is that the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendments number 2 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 48 of 2016, be now read a third time. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to make minor amendments to statute law.
Next order.
Order number 9, motion, report of the Committee of the Whole House on the Refugees Bill, National Assembly Bill number 29 of 2016. Question to be put and third reading.
Member for Vihiga, once you put your hands in the pocket, you walk so slowly like you are in Vihiga. You've already become the governor. Take your seat. Take your seat. Honourable members, once again, this is for the House to agree with the Committee of the Whole House and thereafter proceed to the other stages of one's third reading. And therefore, put the question for agreement that this House do agree with the report of the Committee of the Whole House on its consideration of the Refugees National Assembly Bill number 29 of 2016. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. As many of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. The mover, Honorable Agostino Neto.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the Refugees Bill, National Assembly Bill number 26 of 2016, be now read a third time. I also request the Honorable Onyura, MP for Butula, to second.
Honorable Onyura. Yes, Honorable Onyura.
Mr. Speaker, it's a very timely bill, and I second.
Debate had been concluded, but on Thursday last week, the chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, the Honorable Mutamu Musimi, claimed to move an amendment or some amendments to that report. He moved, he was seconded, but debate was interrupted on various points of orders by members relating to various sums proposed to be included in the proposed amendments. The House adjourned so that the various committees, specifically Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, was to consider the proposed increment of Kenya shillings 2.5 billion to the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission under the management of electoral processes programs for initial payment of printing of ballot papers and effecting and the allocation of the sum of Kenya shillings 300 million to the National Intelligence Service under the National Security Intelligence Program for security-related interventions. Therefore, we were to hear representations from one Defense and Foreign Relations Committee as to whether they have considered these proposed increments of 300 million, and two, Justice and Legal Affairs Committee to hear whether they have considered this and what their views are. We start with the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee. Honorable Raso.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Committee for Defense and Foreign Relations was able to sit on Friday and deliberated on this matter. A presentation was given by the National Intelligence Service leadership, and we were satisfied with what they presented, particularly the emerging threat in the northeastern and in the coastal region that we have experienced over the last couple of weeks. It was unforeseen, and they thought that it is important that they see this as plugging the gap in what they had requested before in the sum of 900 million. Secondly, they were able to confirm to us that the additional funding was requested primarily to ensure that during the election process or during the electioneering period, the country must have watertight security, particularly in the area of deploying HUMINT throughout the country. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we were satisfied with what they presented, and I wish to request the House to approve the sum of 300 million for National Intelligence Security Service. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We had some other members. The Honorable Midiwo, although he has... Honorable Kenan.
Chairman, I want to also confirm the sentiments of our, I don't know whether I want to call him, wanted to confirm him as our substantive chair.
Forget about what
we empathize and appreciate the good work being done by our officers actually in the intelligence community, and the best we can do as members is to support what they do, because without their vigilance, without their work, then we do not have a country. And therefore, whatever proposal, whatever suggestion, whatever request that they have made is something that is appropriate. It is within the budgetary framework, and my prayer is the members will support so that they can attend to all our security needs. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, honourable members, remember I took the liberty to explain the genesis of the current situation so that people, the members of those committees would speak in relation to what the Honourable Mutamu Musimi had indicated as the proposed increments before we put the question as to the proposed amendment. Because we have to go through the motion of putting a question on the proposed amendments, necessitating these additions, and then thereafter proceed to the original motion, possibly as amended.
This is quite a number of threats from the enemies that we know, from terrorists, and other groups like even Islamic State, which yesterday over on the Voice of America, they announced that they're going to stage attacks during this Ramadan period. That is this, I had this in the morning of Voice of America. And I think we need to secure this country. So I want to really urge all honorable members that we approve this so that we can make our country secure and also make our democracy vibrant, because a secure country promotes a vibrant democracy, which we expect during this electioneering period. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, the Honorable Wesley Korili is not member for Ugunja. Are you also a member of this committee? You know, I want to also hear from members of Justice and Legal Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to comment in respect to both this NIS additional request and the IBC additional request. But
Just
then,
just deal with this one, this one first.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, without really being seen to be belittling the work of the NIS, we know the enormous task they have on their hands as regards to protecting this country. But, Mr. Speaker, I still have a problem, a serious problem. Because the reasons being given as to why this additional 300 million Kenya shillings is required this late in the day are reasons which really are not very convincing. Why I say so? If we are told that one of the reasons is the matter of elections, we knew from as early as 2013 that the elections will be held on the 8th of August 2017. So it cannot be an emergency. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, is the matter of the emerging threats in northeastern Kenya. Mr. Speaker, these threats are not any new threats, if I may call them so, because they have been with us for time, since time immemorial. Mr. Speaker, I will be very reluctant to support this amendment, and therefore I wish to oppose it. On account of the fact that,
very well.
Mr. Speaker, just conclude.
No, just conclude.
Just conclude, yeah. Mr. Speaker, we risk.
I mean, if you want to mislead yourself, that is perfectly within. But you can go and do it out there.
Mr. Speaker, I wish you allow me to make my point. Mr. Speaker, what I meant is that it is true that the NIS does not break down its activities in a manner that people or this House can...
Honorable Kenan, what's your point of order?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it in order for the honorable member to mislead the members and the nation at large that NSIS account is not audited? I have been the chairman of the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee, Mr. Speaker, in the last parliament, and I'm a ranking member, Mr. Speaker, in the current committee, and therefore I can confirm that the accounts of, there are issues that are of security nature, Mr. Speaker, and therefore it's not good. It's not in the interest of anybody to politicize or to trivialize the accounts of the work and the functions of NIS. And Mr. Speaker, let me put it on record that the accounts are audited, but there's nowhere in the world, even if you go to America, even if you go to everywhere, where anybody other than the officers in charge are allowed to audit issues that are security in nature. But the other bits, the financial issues are audited, and therefore, if the honourable member is not familiar with the audit mechanism, then I think the best he can do is to refer to the reports of the Auditor General and see how, the modus operandi, how the accounts of any security, not only NSIS, the accounts of any security agency, not only in Kenya, but in the world is audited, and there are formats. And they are not issues that somebody can just play with politics at any time. And therefore, I want to ask the honourable member to withdraw the assertion that NIS account is not audited. The accounts are audited, properly audited. What is not, and maybe what, there's something, a statement that the honourable, I think a member suggested. Maybe in the next parliament, Mr. Speaker, we should have particular members, just like even America or the UK or Israel or any other, Mr. Speaker, who are vetted, who can have access to the nitty-gritty of NSIS account. And that is the only way we can have a secure, Mr. Speaker, and a functioning security intelligence, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I believe that my good friend, whom I really respect, to withdraw that assertion that the accounts are not audited and accept the realities and the dynamics of the security of state, Mr. Speaker, not only in Kenya, but in the whole world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Andai, I'm sure that sounds like information that indeed they are audited. You didn't listen. Who are you addressing now when you are seated? Who are you addressing when you are seated? So you are through. Honourable members, all I had said, and this is what I said, we needed to hear comments related to that particular item. It is okay, Honourable Andai is entitled to his views, however erroneous they may be, but those are nevertheless his views. Yeah, he represents the people of Ugunja that way. Yes. Continue with what? There's no time. Honourable members, we've had, remember we said we wanted to hear members of the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee specifically about this issue. And the indication is that they have sat and considered. They sat on Friday as we are directed. Can I hear from Justice and Legal Affairs? You just walked in. You know, some of you must know that I am always okayed. I can even tell you the exact time you walked in. Honorable Olagwaluoch, Justice and Legal Affairs. Your card is not working. Oh.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, arising from your directions last week on Thursday, Justice and Legal Affairs Committee met with the CEO of IBC yesterday under my chair as temporary chair. Mr. Speaker, the two concerns that were raised in the House last week is the proposed amendment by Musimi in order according to law? Would it amount to a double allocation? Is it a proper amendment? Mr. Speaker, we were given a full brief by the IBC yesterday, and we clearly understood that this allocation was passed recommended by our committee in the financial year 2016-2017. But because the date of expenditure falls in a different financial year, 2017-2018, it had to come by way of amendment. And the printers of ballot papers, Mr. Speaker, were not willing to go ahead with the contract unless there was a commitment that funds were available. And that is in accordance with the law, that the PFM Act, because unless funds are made available, they would not commit to start the process. So there was a real need, and we understood as a committee that this amendment is in order, and IBC needs to have 2.5 billion shillings factored in the budget of the next financial year and accounted for now. So to that extent, Mr. Speaker, the committee unanimously accepted the explanation and recommends to the House that this amendment be passed. Mr. Speaker, I wish to state also, for the benefit of the House and the nation, that the sentiments expressed by the CEO of IBC is that they are in the last stretch of procuring the ballot papers for the elections of August. And at this stage, if the judiciary were to stop the process and delay it by even 1 week, then Kenya would not hold elections on the 8th of August. So you are urged, we understand the independence of the judiciary, but I wish to urge the judiciary to appreciate the circumstances under which we are operating, that the process should not be interfered with at this stage. If the judiciary interferes with the process at this stage, then we risk plunging this country into chaos. It's a caution that I wish this House to alert the judiciary about. But in a nutshell, the committee then recommends that this amendment be adopted by the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I think honourable members.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I've just come from the peace conference and had an opportunity to talk to the Vice Chair and the CEO of IBC over the same matter. And I want to confirm whatever they told me, it's in agreement with what Honourable Chair Alwaj has said. So we do support Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Is he out of order? I thought he is within. What? Well, if he has spoken to somebody, there's nothing wrong. There's not. No, it's not out of order to say that, because all of you say that you have even seen it. I've heard Honorable Kamama say that he had something from Voice of America or some other such like places. So there's nothing out of order unless you just want to introduce another matter. Member for Ugenya, you want to say something on this?
No. I just wanted to support what Honorable Lago said, because I sit in Legal Affairs Committee, and we agreed that the money as requested for the ballot papers is as in the order paper today, Mr. Speaker.
Other members, Honorable Richard Tongi, if you could just, the member for Bura is a very friendly person. You can sit next to him without any fear of being scratched. Honorable members, I think we need to make some progress. The motion which was moved by the Honorable Mutawa Musyimi was for this amendment. And the indications that now we are getting in the House is that both committees which had raised issues have since met and agreed or been briefed by the relevant actors from the National Intelligence Service proposed by the Honorable Mutawa Musyimi, which is as follows: that the motion be amended by inserting the following words immediately after the words Second Supplementary Appropriations Act 2017, subject to A, increment of Kenya shillings 300 million to the National Intelligence Service under the National Security Intelligence Programs for security-related interventions. B, increment of Kenya shillings 2.5 billion to the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission under the Management of Electoral Processes Program for initial payment of printing of ballot papers. C, reallocation of Kenya shillings 90 million within the State Department of Arts and Culture from General Administration, Planning and Support Services as follows: Kenya shillings 50 million to the Kenya Film Commission and Kenya shillings 40 million to the Kenya Film Classification Board under the Arts Program for payment for contract for ongoing international and local marketing campaigns and procurement of censorship suit, respectively. D, effecting the consequential amendments to the first schedule and the total sum approved accordingly. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honourable members, those who are making their way, if they could just, like the member for Seme. The two elderly members who are making their way, please take your seats. Honourable members, let me just explain again. Having disposed of the amendment by the Honourable Mutava Musiemi in the manner that the House has, what remained of the original motion was merely to put the question. I therefore now proceed to put the question, which is that this House adopts a report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the second supplementary estimates for the financial year 2016-2017, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, June 6, 2017, and pursuant to provisions of Article 223 of the Constitution and standing order number 243, approves Roman 1, an increment of the total recurrent expenditure for financial year 2016-2017 by Kenya shillings 6,493,177,978 in respect of the votes as contained in the schedule. Roman 2, an increment of the total capital expenditure for financial year 2016-2017 by Kenya shillings 42,132,984,988 in respect of the votes as contained in the first schedule. Roman 3, an overall increment in the total budget for financial year 2016-2017 by Kenya shillings 48,626,162,966 in respect of the votes as contained in the first schedule. And further, Roman 4, resolves that the first schedule forms the basis of the enactment of the Second Supplementary Appropriations Act 2017, subject to A, reallocation of Kenya shillings 507 million within the State Department of Irrigation under the Irrigation and Land Reclamation Program from Dhiba Dam to the National Irrigation Board to clear pending bills in the following projects. Kenya shillings 307 million for Bura Scheme Gravity Project, Kenya shillings 100 million for Daua River Flood Water Control Project, and Kenya shillings 100 million for expanded national irrigation projects. B, increment of Kenya shillings 550 million to the State Department of Livestock under the Livestock Resource Management and Development Program for drought mitigation interventions in ASAL counties. And C, effecting the consequential amendments to the first schedule and the total sum approved accordingly, subject to A, increment of Kenya shillings 300 million in the National Intelligence Service and the National Security Intelligence Program for security-related interventions. B, increment of Kenya shillings 2.5 billion to the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission under the Management of Electoral Processes Program for initial payment of printing of ballot papers. C, reallocation of Kenya shillings 90 million within the State Department of Arts and Culture from General Administration, Planning and Support Services as follows. Kenya shillings 50 million to the Kenya Film Commission and Kenya shillings 40 million to the Kenya Film Classification Board under the Arts Program for payment of contracts for ongoing international and local marketing campaigns and procurement of censorship suits, respectively. D, effecting the consequential amendments to the first schedule and the total sum approved accordingly. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. As many of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Effectively, it means that the Honorable Mutava Musiemi, you may proceed to have the supplementary appropriations bill prepared for consideration by the House. Next order.
Order number 11, motion, adoption of the 21st report of the Public Investments Committee on the audited accounts of state corporations.
Honorable Kenani, have you finished moving this report?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish once again to continue from where I left the other time. Mr. Speaker, the 21st annual report of the Public Investment Committee has closely examined and scrutinized audited financial statements of 41 state corporations, Mr. Speaker. And its examination and scrutiny of the audits were or were not taken, Mr. Speaker, keeping in mind the relevant public financial management principles, public finance regulations, public procurement and asset disposal legislation, public procurement and asset disposal regulations, international. Mr. Speaker, may I plead with the members to consult? Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, may I ask the members to consult in low tones?
Honorable members, Honorable Member Vombita, I appreciate that you are in the mood of addressing electorates, but please, they are not these ones. Allow the member for Elders to move this motion. Consult in lower tones. Member for Ugenya, member for Ugunja. Member for Ugenya and member for Ugunja, consult in lower tones. I appreciate you are neighbors. And one was hyped out of the other. So you may be having very touchy issues, but please lower your decibels. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The public finance regulations, public procurements and asset disposal legislation, public procurement and asset disposal regulations, international public sector accounting standards, international finance reporting standards, relevant to the commercial states of corporation. Mr. Speaker, the committee was also guided by the mandate and strategic objectives of each of the state corporations, Mr. Speaker, And Mr. Speaker, therefore, the following is a summary of the committee's general observations, Mr. Speaker, and recommendations as per the findings of the audited financial statements of the 41 state corporations whose accounts, Mr. Speaker, we have had an opportunity to interrogate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the first thing that we noted is non-remittances of statutory deductions, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we realized, the committee observed with a lot of concern that some state corporations, Mr. Speaker, were not remitting statutory deductions such as BE, NSF contributions, NHIF medical deductions, and sessions must remit these statutory deductions, Mr. Speaker, timelessly and operate within the law, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, what the committee recommends is that these state corporations should settle all the statutory deductions, Mr. Speaker, in a timely manner as provided for, Mr. Speaker, in the relevant legislation and financial regulations. Two, Mr. Speaker, our second recommendation is that the inspectorate, our second recommendation, Mr. Speaker, is the Inspector General of State Corporation, Mr. Speaker, should ensure that all pending statutory deductions, Mr. Speaker, which the various state corporations are still yet to pay, Mr. Speaker, are settled within 3 months of the adoption of this report, Mr. Speaker. The third recommendation, Mr. Speaker, is all the accounting officers, that is the chief executive of this state corporation, should ensure that this anomaly is addressed as a matter of urgency, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other recommendation, the other issue that we realized was the issue of land and buildings. The committee observed with a lot of concern that several state corporations do not possess title documents for their various assets, Mr. Speaker, that they own, including land and buildings, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General has noted that the Postal Corporation of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, has close to 68 properties, Mr. Speaker, prime properties all over Kenya that have not been properly, Mr. Speaker, documented, and therefore our recommendation is the Cabinet Secretary for Land, Housing and Urban Development, Mr. Speaker, and the Chairman of the Land Commission should put caveats, Mr. Speaker, on all these parcels of land, Mr. Speaker, belonging to different state corporations, so that these properties, Mr. Speaker, are protected from land grabbers. The second recommendation, Mr. Speaker, is the CS for Land, Housing and Urban Development should, within 6 months of the adoption of this report, Mr. Speaker, compile a credible report and submit to the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, for all parcels of land held by various state corporations across the country as a first step towards taking a stock of land assets, Mr. Speaker, held by different state corporations. Third recommendation, Mr. Speaker, is the judiciary should also consider prioritizing the conclusion of all cases relating to illegal allocation, individual grabbers, Mr. Speaker, should be properly accounted for and such lands, Mr. Speaker, be repossessed. Mr. Speaker, the third issue that we captured in the process of analyzing the audited accounts is the expenditures beyond approved budget, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we realized that the committee observed that several state corporations, Mr. Speaker, were spending beyond the approved budget, Mr. Speaker, in the financial year. Mr. Speaker, we found this as a warrant trend, Mr. Speaker, because we have the PMF Act, we have the Constitution, and therefore, if every entity will be allowed to spend as they wish, Mr. Speaker, then the issue of budgetary control mechanism, Mr. Speaker, will be a waste. And therefore, our recommendation is institutions like the University of Eldoret, Mr. Speaker, institutions like Kibabi University, Mr. Speaker, have spent a lot actually without their approved budget, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a warrant trend, and therefore the recommendation is the heads of these organizations, Mr. Speaker, should put measures in place to ensure that these organizations operate within the approved budget, Mr. Speaker. The second recommendation, Mr. Speaker, is if the post-FAFTO budget, Mr. Speaker, is denied, the chief executive of this organization, Mr. Speaker, for a particular financial year should be held accountable, and the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Mr. Speaker, should initiate investigations and report back to the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, 6 months after the adoption of this report, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the third recommendation is all state corporations must also seek timely approval of their budget variation, Mr. Speaker, so that they can always operate within the public, they can operate within the Constitution, within the State Corporation Act, the Public Finance Management Act, Mr. Speaker, of 2012, and other regulations, Mr. Speaker. And this is the only way, Mr. Speaker, we can operate within a disciplined financial mechanism, Mr. Speaker. The fourth issue that we realized, Mr. Speaker, is irregular payments of board sitting allowances, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, boards of different organizations, Mr. Speaker, have disregarded even the provisions of the State Corporations Act, the provisions of the Public Finance Act, Mr. Speaker, and more recently, the provisions of the Mongozo, Mr. Speaker, rules, which somehow offer to offer guidance on areas where there was a lacuna on certain pertinent issues relating to their day-to-day mandates, Mr. Speaker. But therefore, these issues must also be addressed, and the committee recommends that accounting officers of various state corporations, Mr. Speaker, must at all times ensure that Section 10, Subsection 1 of the State Corporation Act, Cap 466 of the laws of Kenya, as amended under the Statute Law Amendment Act, Mr. Speaker, of June 2002, is fully complied with. The other issue that, Mr. Speaker, we realized is the issue of procurement of goods and services, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the committee observed that several state corporations continue to violate the provisions of the procurement law and regulations, Mr. Speaker, in their procurement of goods and services, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is also a warrant trade because the Constitution is explicit, Mr. Speaker, on how all state agencies are supposed to carry out their procurement process, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this issue has been disregarded, and the government continues to lose billions and billions of shillings, Mr. Speaker, in a fraudulent and untimely, Mr. Speaker, in a procurement process that is not properly structured and that is not properly implemented, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, the recommendation, or they do not have competence to do certain omissions, Mr. Speaker. The second recommendation, Mr. Speaker, is the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Mr. Speaker, should, within 1 month after the adoption of this report, investigate these anomalies and report to the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker. The third recommendation is the Director General of the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority, Mr. Speaker, should pursuant to Section 41 of the Procurement Disposal Act, Mr. Speaker, follow up these cases, Mr. Speaker, and ensure that the taxpayers get value for their money, Mr. Speaker. The fourth recommendation, Mr. Speaker, is to debar any individual or any company. These days, Mr. Speaker, there are individuals called tenderpreneurs, and therefore their work is just to fleece the taxpayers' money through fraudulent procurement process. And therefore, if any individual or any entity or any company has participated in such fraudulent procurement process, Mr. Speaker, these individuals must be debarred for a certain period of time so that they can repent and make sure that taxpayers also get value for their money, Mr. Speaker. The sixth issue, Mr. Speaker, that we realized in the audits of this organization is the delay in availing of documents to the Auditor General Office, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General Office is a critical independent institution, Mr. Speaker, under Chapter 15 of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, we found that using lame excuses, Mr. Speaker, and different reasons, Mr. Speaker, different parastatals have used frivolous reasons, Mr. Speaker, to the Auditor's Office for delaying and giving critical information, Mr. Speaker, that is necessary for the preparation of the audited accounts, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we found also this trend warrant, and therefore the committee recommends that the executive officers, that is accounting officers, must at all times comply with the audit timelines as specified in Section 68K, Mr. Speaker, of the PMF Act 2012 and must take appropriate measures to resolve any issues arising from the audit which remain outstanding as required by Section 68(1) of the PMF Act 2012, Mr. Speaker. Individually held liable and be surcharged for such delays, Mr. Speaker, because this costs the taxpayers a lot of money. The fourth recommendation, Mr. Speaker, at the end of 3 months after the end of each financial year, the Auditor General publishes and publicize the names of state corporations that have not submitted their complete financial statements, Mr. Speaker, as required. This, Mr. Speaker, is meant also to act as a deterrent, so that next time, if you don't submit, because the Auditor General is by law required to submit audited statements within a specific time, and therefore, if any state entity does not comply and does not assist our auditors in meeting this objective, Mr. Speaker, they should be punished, they should be named, their names must be published so that every Kenyan knows who this individual or this CEO is and who participates and who does not actually give information to the Auditor General office. Mr. Speaker, the fifth recommendation is the Auditor General should not accept any documents submitted after the end of 6 months at the end of each financial year, and instead submit the audited statements to the National Assembly as stipulated in Article 229, subsection 4 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, the other issue that we also realize is delay in the appointment of board members, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is an issue that is worrying. And this is one issue that many CEOs, Mr. Speaker, have taken advantage of. Mr. Speaker, the appointment of board members, Mr. Speaker, is clearly stipulated in the State Corporation Act, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, the appointing authority, whether it is the President, whether it is the CS, whether it is any individual, Mr. Speaker, must ensure that at any given time, should there be a vacancy, individuals, because Kenyans have highly qualified men and women, Mr. Speaker, must be appointed so that this issue of creating, Mr. Speaker, lacuna that allows these individuals who are always prepared to fleece the taxpayers' money get an opportunity to mess the finances of this critical state corporation, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, our recommendation is the Chief Executive Officer should ensure that interest advanced, Mr. Speaker, to some of these board members is recovered within the stipulated time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other recommendation is the CEOs must also immediately take the necessary measures to ensure that outstanding interest is also paid, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we realized because many individuals from different backgrounds are appointed to different state corporation board, Mr. Speaker, immediately they are appointed. Some have gone there with the agenda of fleecing these organizations to the extent that they don't surrender interest. Mr. Speaker, they don't account for interest, and whatever they do is like they have become law unto themselves, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this issue must be addressed as a matter of urgency. Mr. Speaker, this country at times come up with critical and very important documents like Mongozo documents, Mr. Speaker. The provisions or different provisions of the Mongozo document have been disregarded, Mr. Speaker, and this trend really is worrying, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, therefore, our recommendation is the government should ensure that different boards of different state corporations operate within the law, Mr. Speaker, and more so, where there is a lacuna in the law, Mr. Speaker, they should follow the strict interpretation as provided before by the Mongozo rules, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other bit that we realized was an issue of pre-IAS audit queries, Mr. Speaker. At times we realized that the Auditor General has had challenges, Mr. Speaker, and further to its recommendation contained, further to our recommendation contained in the 20th reports of State Corporation account, that the Auditor General ensures that until an audit matter is satisfactorily resolved, it should continue to appear in the subsequent audit reports of the Auditor General on the financial statements of the respective state corporations. The committee, following consultation with the Auditor General, recommends that the matters that have been exhaustively addressed by the committee and recommendations made should not recur in the subsequent reports of the Auditor General, Mr. Speaker. For example, the Auditor General continues to issue a number of organizations, Mr. Speaker, with clean audit accounts, and yet there are issues that have been sorted out. There are issues that are still pending, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, what we are recommending is that these issues have been satisfactorily resolved or comprehensively addressed by the committee should be excluded from the subsequent audit report, Mr. Speaker, so that these organizations' books are not bogged down by audit issues that have been resolved a long time ago, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, finally, and I believe this will be our final report, Mr. Speaker, on audited statement, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this committee continues to play a very important role in the examination of audited statements, Mr. Speaker, of different research corporations, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to thank your office, to thank you individually as the Speaker of this House, Mr. Speaker. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the clerk of the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Secretariat of this committee, headed by Susan Maritim, and all other staff, Mr. Speaker, who have worked day and night to make sure that this committee not only generates some of the most conclusive and in-depth reports, Mr. Speaker, but also timelessly, Mr. Speaker, addressed the issue of backlog, Mr. Speaker, in the audit statements of different state corporations, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by the time, and I hope this House will adopt this report, Mr. Speaker, this committee will have looked at over 100, almost 200, Mr. Speaker, audited statements of different state corporations, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the reason why the framers of our standing orders, Mr. Speaker, decided to have two very, very critical, important, Mr. Speaker, committee, and you do understand the critical role this committee actually plays in the oversight of the accounts of different state corporations, Mr. Speaker. And to this end, I want to say thank you to all those who supported us as a committee. I want to say thank you to all the members, Mr. Speaker, the 27 members, Mr. Speaker. Over the last 4 years, Mr. Speaker, we have had unanimous reports. Mr. Speaker, we have generated critical reports. And Mr. Speaker, we have worked day and night to make sure that taxpayers get also value for their money. I want to wish them well. I know quite a number of them are still active. Out of the 27 members, I think 4 of them are gunning up for gubernatorial seats, Mr. Speaker. I wish them well, and I do know that this committee has given them an opportunity to prepare to adequately get all the requisite financial, administrative, procurement, human resource, Mr. Speaker, management skills, so that once they are elected, they are not faced with the challenges that their predecessors, Mr. Speaker, continue to face even under the current Parliament, Mr. Speaker. I do know that quite a number of them have secured their party nominations. I also wish them an opportunity to serve in very important committees. Mr. Speaker, having said this, I beg to move and ask the Honorable Olago Oloch to second. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Olago Oloch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have the privilege and honor of serving in this committee as a ranking member, and I wish to draw attention of the House that this 21st report contains reports on 42 state corporations as set out between page 3 and page 4 of the report. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend our chairman, Honorable Aden Kenan, for having provided the leadership that we required in this committee. Sometimes it has been very difficult to get the information we wanted. He has gone out of his way to ensure that the committee was properly facilitated and the committee was able to get proper witnesses from the state corporations. Mr. Speaker, some of the corporations that we are dealing with were hostile to the committee and were not willing to disclose some of the information that was required by the committee. Mr. Speaker, I want to address 2 issues that have been mentioned in the report. One is the Mwongozo regulations by the government and the appointment of board CEOs and board members. And this process, let the board have taken cases to court. Some of the reported to the corruption authority, but not on the being taken. So the thieves of this land still remain free and nothing happens to them. So Speaker, we are recommending in this report that where is evidence of theft of public land and the corruption authority has been notified, they need to move with haste and ensure that investigations are completed, arrests are made, and the thieves are prosecuted. Some of the thieves of public land in this country are the ones who are in authority. They use the same assets to protect themselves from prosecution. The Speaker, that's not the right thing. The Speaker, again, where I come from, the state corporation is subject to tell you. The Speaker, in the year 2008 to 2009, Santa Corporation corporation without the board of directors. The effect of this was that now those who are the managers, they have tempered funds to the extent that Sunday Hotel was not able to operate at all. And was brought down to the sea. It came to the Parliament from his own county. That state investment has been brought down to its feet. Only last week, auctioneers were at Sunday Hotel to attack the property of the hotel. Only because Sunday Hotel was not able to pay taxes and was not able to pay deduction from staff. Because of the inability of the appointing authorities to appoint boards of directors and the authorities as well as and the capacity to manage the assets of the authority. The bigger then we as members of the Public Investment Committee will feel gratified that our recommendations have helped to make Kenya a better country. Our recommendations will help to make Kenya a country where those who are in authority are accountable members of the country. I second this report and I
anasema mumanyi apatana pesa. Mumanyi naye anasema kwani wako wamekaa chini wakifanya hivi. Mimi nakwambia. Ndio wote kwa finance na number 7 I propose the question. This is a bit as a document to pass the report to the Public Investment Committee and the open accounts of state corporations being elected on the House as of May 18, 2017. Grabbing of land belonging to Kenya Airport Authority,
Manzala if you were busy,
to Kenyans around the world.
Jana nilikuwa napiga juu saa 5.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of some of them generate wealth. Part of it is never accounted for, and there's also a lot of stealing in some of the state corporations. Ordinarily, the company usually come up with an idea of reducing the state corporations, they lumping them together as the ones in the Department of Agriculture. And successful because the government trying to reduce the state corporations. But now we keep on passing laws forming state corporations in the country. And it seems it is an area of the government, Mr. Speaker, we cannot avoid to look at to make sure that it is audited and checked for the rest of the government. Mr. Speaker, this report is very voluminous, and I really want to thank the committee for a job well done, especially this being a committee now in the House for the Speaker. It's quite an effort, Mr. Speaker, and I believe also the rollout of the House really assist the members to be able to go through 42 state proposals, of which has been said before, Mr. Speaker, some of them are not very committed. Mr. Speaker, these state proposals include universities, serious budgets. Ordinarily, the government is not supposed to trade or to make money for the nation, and a lot of times there is that borders to the same, especially in the agriculture, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Agriculture, some of the state corporations, whatever they do, to be able to generate aid, including the university, Mr. Speaker. And it's an area which was looked during the last budget, Mr. Speaker. A lot of changes were made by the respective ministries. And some of the state corporations were not happy with them because it was strict measures to make sure that the monies within are utilized properly. But some of them, like the universities, were not happy with that because the independence was being taken away from through a resolution of the House. And they tried their best to be assisted with the budget, but it was not possible to still see that as far as the Speaker, the state corporations don't have the closure. So I think that the move that has been started by this committee is good, and we need to look at the future, especially on the recommendations on the proper use of land, the proper protection of public land, collide with others who don't need the country and heritage this land. Produce means also an original name the land will then be very part of the nation. So Mr. Speaker, I do support this report and I urge other members to do so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So, ukiwa una save more ama?
I would want to start by appreciating the good work they've done.
Anakwambia wengine walioona bwana juu kufika walikula kwa hoteli mpaka wakaondoka. Sasa kile walidu walichukua fuzo yao wakaenda wakaishi na yeye akafunza huko vitu.
There's the issue of protecting
that is why, as a man, you need to know how to cook.
These are public assets. By senior officials of this corporation.
Mimi kuna mtu napenda.
Leo utakuwa na shida wewe.
Huyu jamaa anaongea.
Wewe utakuwa na shida mingi sana.
I like the way he speaks. I like the way he speaks.
Unajua Ken, I've never been married. Unajua? So naongea
hata juzi nilikwambia hizo zote unaongea. Na mimi tutaingia kwa hiyo. Tutarudi chini zero. Tutakuwa vile kabisa.
Kama sukuma. Kama spinach.
Sasa hiyo sasa utafanywa hivyo kwa watumikisha gaso
alafu unaona kama mayai ya asubuhi ile macho
hiyo yote mtapata. Hiyo yote mtapata. Kama hii. Najua macho nataka ikuwe kama hii.
Unaona hiyo macho.
Formal practices
kula
hiyo yote atapata, but not for long. For a very short time. Atapata.
Oi. Sikujoke na life.
No, I'm just saying. Of course, I like your ambition.
That's what you want.
Let me tell you, marriage, ikifika opposite. Hizo mambo kama unajua kupika ajui, hizo vitu unajua ajui.
Kwanza mimi asijaribu kuniwekea spice kwa chakula. Hiyo sitakula.
Hizo zote atapata.
Sasa naye kama ana spice. Ai. Afadhali apike mara mbili. Wallahi ama apike ugali na kuja kufikia mboga.
Sasa shida ya wanawake. Tumeonyesha unajua kupika.
Anachukua sasa, hiyo ni responsibility yake.
Au si want to speak out here.
Si ni kama mwanaume kumwonyesha unajua. Olelemi. Kole.
Siwende kwa nini? Box.
Mr. Speaker, for getting me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion. Lakini ushai notice kuna Wamasai huko. I wish to move an amendment to this particular motion. Mr. Speaker, I wish. Nani wait. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, yeah. Very well, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Proceed,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the motion be amended by inserting the following words immediately after the word 2017, subject to Roman 1, deletion of committee's recommendation under paragraph 14, appearing in paragraph 378 of the report. Roman 2, deletion of the committee's observation and recommendation under paragraph 15, appearing on page 379 of the report. And finally, Mr. Speaker, Roman 3, deletion of committee's observations and recommendation under paragraph 16, appearing on page 382 of the report. Mr. Speaker, the reason of the amendment, Mr. Speaker, of the sections, they are actually inaccurate and they are inconsistent, Mr. Speaker, with the body of the report. Mr. Speaker, I wish to invite the Honorable Kenand to second.
He's the mover.
Mr. Speaker, I move.
Who seconds? Honorable Aluch? Honorable Munyinyi? Honorable Munyinyi, Honorable the committee.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you very much for the opportunity to second this amendment. Mr. Speaker, it is a straightforward amendment, merely correcting typos and ensuring that the report is clear. Mr. Speaker, the Public Investments Committee, in its effort to ensure that we undertake the oversight role, has had a number of state corporations and parastatals as moved by the chair, which went through the process by the committee, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to take this chance to express my gratitude to yourself and the officers of Parliament, the clerk's office, for the support that the committee received in the course of our work. Mr. Speaker, I'm certainly sure that this time of Parliament, Public Investments Committee did a commendable job because we did undertake.
But you know, this is an amendment, a dilatory motion.
Mr. Speaker, will I speak now on the main motion?
No. We wanted you to speak to second the amendment.
Then I'll speak on the main motion.
Yes, you still
I second, Mr. Speaker, sir. Thank you.
Honourable members, I propose the question, which is that the motion be amended by inserting the following ones immediately after 2017, in brackets, subject to Roman 1, deletion of the committee's recommendations under paragraph 14, appearing on page 378 of the report. Roman 2, deletion of the committee's observations and recommendations under paragraph 15, appearing on page 379 of the report. And Roman 3, deletion of the committee's observations and recommendations under paragraph 16, appearing on page 382 of the report. I put the question, which is that the motion be amended as proposed by the Honorable Corey Olelemain. If as many as that opinion say aye, as many of the contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. So debate on the motion on the report will continue as amended. So even as people debate this report, then what is appearing in those paragraphs 14, 15, and 16 of pages 378, 379, and 382 respectively are deleted. They are deleted. Now, the Honorable Correa Lelemen, you want now to contribute to the main motion, the main report. Very well.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support the motion as amended. Honorable Speaker, as a ranking member of the PIC, Mr. Speaker, I wish to really thank the chairperson, the Honorable Kenan, and the honorable members, Mr. Speaker, for indeed working extra hard, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that they have examined over 190 parastatals, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as actually highlighted by the chair and the rest of the members, Mr. Speaker, there are a number of observations and a number of recommendations, Mr. Speaker, that are to be of immense importance, Mr. Speaker, to the respective corporations. Mr. Speaker, I believe the PIC committee of the 11th Parliament have set high standards as far as examination of accounts are concerned, Mr. Speaker. And I therefore believe, Mr. Speaker, therefore those who will be privileged to serve in this committee in the 12th Parliament, Mr. Speaker, will have a tall order as far as running and examining the accounts of the various organizations or parastatals are concerned. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I've enjoyed working with this team, and I want to appreciate, Mr. Speaker, the entire membership, the staff, your office, Mr. Speaker, and the office of the clerk of the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, we had a wonderful time as far as the committee in ensuring that we deliver our best for the benefit of the people of Kenya, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the motion as amended. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Matayo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also rise to support the motion as moved by the Honorable Adan Kainan, who has done very well during the 11th Parliament, and which role I believe he will play in the 12th Parliament, hoping that all of us will be here. Mr. Speaker, the parastatals are state organizations that are run for the benefit of the people of this country, and their good management is very, very important to us all. And I'm very happy that the PIC has been following up on the running of these institutions to ensure that they are being run well. Unfortunately, it's been reported that there's some hostility from some of the management of these institutions. We need in future to come out very clearly on what should happen to state corporations which or whose leadership is not cooperating with an institution like the Oversight Committee of this House and other institutions, including the Office of the Auditor General. If those leaders are not cooperating, Mr. Speaker, then we need to give teeth even to the House of Parliament, the committee, and the Auditor General to ensure that these people are arraigned and steps are taken to ensure that they are not given any other appointments in the running of state corporations. This is very important, and we don't think that there should be anybody running any organization of the government that should stand in the way of an oversight committee, such as the Public Investments Committee. Mr. Speaker, it has been said that there sometimes arises a lacuna, a gap, when the term of a board comes to an end and the appointment of another board. This should be clearly done and properly done so that actually the appointments of these boards are done in a staggered manner so that at least when other members' terms expire, there are those who remain to keep institutional memory and to ensure that there's no time that the CEO have a field day to do whatever they usually do. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, again, these state corporations have been used as cash cows in this country. This is something that we need to bring to a stop, because when they are used as cash cows by some, from some quarters, then it means that they are not able to.
This country needs also to reduce the number of state corporations and privatize some of these corporations. It is sad that every time we want to privatize some of these corporations, there is a lot of politics, to a tune where we continue, pumping in huge sums of money. I think it's called TALDA in short. And because we, as a committee, there was a place we visited after a community petitioned Parliament regarding the overflow of the dams. And when we checked what TALDA requested, to date, TALDA has never been, given that mobilization to be able to, clear with issues that the committee that did recommend those issues. But that notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, I want to start by talking about the prior year's audit queries. Mr. Speaker, it's important, yes, as it has been, of course, recommended by the committee, that prior audit queries, which have exhaustively been addressed by the committee, they need not, and these are, as an accountant also, these are international accounting standards, that you make an audit look as if it's so huge and so big, and yet some of these things have been, have been addressed by this committee. So it's important for the Auditor General to follow the recommendations which have been given by the committee, and of course, according to the report on page 9, I think you had, it was a continued, you had a meeting with the Auditor General where you agreed that some of these things needs not to recur in every other financial year. It makes, of course, these are prudent international accounting standards, which is important. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, these queries, again, they need to be addressed exhaustively by the relevant authority. So again, so that we don't just have an Auditor General who just does audits and make queries, and then they are not acted upon. So it's important for us to be able to follow the respective government agencies which are supposed to undertake the recommendation of the Auditor General to take seriously their work, so that we don't have this. Regarding the non-remittance of statutory deductions, Mr. Speaker, it is very sad that workers thrive, they are deducted those statutory deductions from their monthly pay slip for a long time, and yet there are no remittance. Of course, at the end of the day, if now, for example, if the recoveries of NSSF, NHIF are not done on time, the title deeds, no title deeds. Mr. Speaker, this is one of the greatest that gives, these land grabbers an opportunity for them to be able to, if they go to any of those land registry at the local level, and they realize that a state corporation, we were when we went to the Committee on Implementation in Mombasa, and people have encroached the airport land. And they have encroached is because that the airport authority had not acquired title deeds. So, Mr. Chair, I think, Mr. Speaker, it's important for the respective corporations. And we are asking, as recommended by the committee, that the National Lands Commission and the Ministry of Lands needs to assist these state corporations to acquire title deeds so that they can stop this dangerous issue of land grabbing. And you'll find most of the places is that they might even know this land belongs to a certain state corporation. They get a fake title, which is, corruptly acquired title, and then they go and go to the bank and use the same title to get money from the bank. I think, and this is also killing some of these, most of these financial institutions. So it's important for the recommendations that has been given that the Ministry of Lands and the National Land Commission to fasten the acquisition of title deeds to the various state corporations. There is, of course, as indicated by the chair, the delay state corporations, to go into this issue of corruption. We try to stop corruption from, and at the end of the day, it is eventually the President of the Republic who is always charged for issues of malpractice and corruption in the country, while yet it is some specific individual. So it's important where delay of availing documents for purposes of audit, wherever it appears, then the the chief officers, they are supposed to be held to account and be able to be compliant, to be able to give, and without doing that, I was flashed some regulations that you have to, you have to bring back your interest within 7 days. So I think these financial regulations should be followed by everyone. With those few remarks, as a committee of implementation, we look forward that the report is adopted so that the recommendations can be undertaken and followed. I support.
Member for Butula.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I do rise to support the report as amended, and Mr. Speaker, also, of course, to commend the committee for the job well done that has resulted in this volume of a report covering nearly 400 pages and examining about 41 parastatals. That's not an easy task by any chance. Mr. Speaker, looking through the report, just actually skimming through, you find that there are all manner of irregularities, all kinds of irregularities. For example, running quite through nearly all of them, there are issues of irregular payments of allowances, issues of irregular procurements, matters of mismanagement of imprest, non-return of the imprest, improper disposal of assets, non-remission of statutory deductions, including in some cases members' funds like those going to prosecutions, surcharges. What I'm not sure about, Mr. Speaker, is whether any actual concrete action is ever taken. Because these are reports that have been produced year in, year out. At times it covers the same organizations, the same management in those organizations, and we don't see anything happening. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that is part of what promotes impunity. I don't know what mechanism we have as a House to ensure that these recommendations are followed and are implemented. Otherwise, the whole thing just ends up in futility, becomes a report. It ends up on a conducive environment for business and not being involved in business as I've seen. So, Mr. Speaker, to minimize the kind of impunity we see where people get into these parastatals, mismanage, loot, dispose of its assets haphazardly, I think we should now start seeing prosecutions and individuals named and shamed, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I also wonder, there are certain monitoring and regulatory organizations that have existed. I remember there used to be one called, an agency called Efficiency Monitoring Unit, the Parastatal Advisory Committee, and the like. I don't know whether they still exist, and if they do, what are they doing and allowing this kind of mess to happen in the parastatals, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I think the more important thing is to ensure that what the job that this committee has done and has come up with very good recommendations are followed up and are implemented so that we can they can be able to serve this country better. Mr. Speaker, I support the report. Thank you for the opportunity.
Member Boseme. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying I stand to support this report, and also let me appreciate the work that has been done by the committee. Looking at the volume, the report we have here, and the number of institutions that have been audited and they have gone through this, I think this is commendable work. Mr. Speaker, they have raised certain issues that actually do question what the objectives of starting our corporations and these corporations. Of course, we know that one of the reasons we start this is to offer service, in some cases, like the Kenya Airways, services that would otherwise not be available and probably cannot be totally left to the private sector. Mr. Speaker, we also know that some of these corporations do support and promote development, like you have the development authorities, the TADA, the Lake Basin Development Authority, Kerio Valley Authority, and the sugar corporations. These are all extremely important in developing in developing services and in developing certain areas like agriculture. But the issues that have been raised, Mr. Speaker, makes one think that are we really serious in the objectives of these corporations? To begin with, they have indicated that there are delays in appointment of boards so that you have corporations that are being run without boards for a long time. It's obvious that if there is no board, you leave the whole corporation to the whim of the CEOs. And that lacuna exposes the corporation to a lot of exploitation. And no wonder, when you look at many of the CEOs, they actually seem to view these corporations as their own property or their own farms. Because if there is no oversight, serious oversight, then that will be a problem. Again, in the appointment of the boards, really in this country, we do see, and this is a sad reality, that these corporations and appointment to these boards are being seen as some form of reward for political loyalty. Once they are viewed like that, instead of being viewed as areas where we need expertise that are going to steer these corporations, then obviously we have the problems that we have with them. They have been described as cash cows, where people see them as areas where they go to make a living, to earn some extra cash, or to enjoy more after their retirement periods. And this, Mr. Speaker, must really be avoided. And we know that these corporations many times have actually been used as conduits. No wonder if you are appointed as a reward for your loyalty, you then see it as, now, this is my time to get back whatever is investment I put in, whether it is in terms of time, whether it is in terms of cash that you was put in prior to that. Obviously, we cannot continue to look at these corporations in that way. For the same reason, if they're seen as a reward, that is what leads to overemployment, that people see these corporations as the places where they can employ their relatives, their friends, and people are related to them. And that leads, Mr. Speaker, without a doubt, to skewed employment, so that people get employed in corporations to a large extent, depending on who they know within the board or in the management of the corporation. And we know these have been a main problem. So we must start seeing these boards as boards that are intended to steer ahead, to steer the corporations into profitability and success. Mr. Speaker, they have also, the report has also raised the issue of security of assets. Again, this may be something that is because of negligence, but sometimes I wonder whether it is not really just deliberate, where corporations will stay with property without proper documentation, like land where there are no proper land titles, there are no proper demarcations of where the land is. And in the end, you find that actually this land is looted, taken over by sometimes people who are in the corporation themselves. So you wonder why is it that titles were not sought and proper documentation done. We know the problem of, for example, of the Kenya Railways, what has happened to Kenya Railways land. There are still issues that has been raised many years since the issue of the Kenya Railways land. It's always clear that within a given time, it will be recovered from their salaries. Why would it take so long until some people even leave employment or move to other employment while they're still holding interest? That is basically just negligence, and I think we need to be more strict with their auditing. And Mr. Speaker, I end up by saying that all these are coming about because if you look at the recommendations that are given, I don't think they are ever implemented. We need firm action, clear indication on this should be done. If somebody should be prosecuted, the matter should be taken forward and the person be prosecuted. If there is need for recovery, let there be recovery at any cost, and even if it means selling people's property, the board members and the CEO's property as the law allows. With that, Mr. Speaker, I do support this report as amended.
I think even equipment to an end of this parliament. The indomitable member for Umuro Dikir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm really humbled by the great name you're giving me. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, I think this parliament is coming to an end. And as friends, we've been very great friends in this house. And of course, I know you will be coming back again as a speaker. And obviously, with the member for Umuro Dikir also will be coming back as a member. And we will meet here again, Mr. Speaker. I wish to thank the chairman of PIC, Parliamentary Committee that I've sat, committee that I've really respected, and members who sit together and work together, regardless of party affiliations. This is only committee, Mr. Speaker, not coerced in any way. We will discuss matters, deal with matters, and dispense with them. There was no arm twisting, either from State House or from the Capitol Hill. We did our job as recommended, as required by law. Mr. Speaker, I must thank the chairman, because obviously this is going to be the last report we are dispensing with as members of parliament of the 11th parliament. Obviously, I don't know, you know, my chairman is now in Jubilee. I don't know who will be chairman again, obviously, in the next parliament, because he's coming back, and I don't know if Jubilee will be in the opposition at that time, so he can also be chairman. I would wish to serve under you as my chairman. But of course, we are praying for every other competitor. Either Jubilee, we are praying for Jubilee to win. We are also praying for CORD to win, because after all are Kenyans. I must also thank the chair for his splendid work, the work that he did. He served as the chair without partisanship. We also served as members. You can see chairman is sitting with my great friend from Narok, Koreo Lele Main, who I'm also wishing we come back together and meet again, probably in the same committee or in some other committees which they might put us in. So I must thank all the members we sat together and we dispensed on many matters. We looked at several parastatals. Mr. Speaker, you remember, this is a committee that is equal of PAC. Obviously, PAC is looking at cabinet secretaries and all that, ministries. But as we mostly dealt with parastatals, and as you know, we got so many parastatals in this country, Mr. Speaker, and I think when we come back, we need to relook at the compositions of these parastatals, and especially on how the affairs of these parastatals are run. Mr. Speaker, among the issues that we actually looked at this 21st report, and the parastatals that fall under this 21st report are 41. And the recommendations, there are issues that we looked at, and then, of course, the recommendations which the committee made. But obviously, among the issues which came up is the question of remittal, non-remittal or non-remittance of statutory deductions. This one was actually an event. It's a situation that is affecting almost all the parastatals equally. And I think this matter must be looked at seriously. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, which obviously was a thorn in the flesh, is the question of land. Remember, Mr. Speaker, land in this country has been exaggerated to a level that people will kill to get even a quarter of an acre, especially in Nairobi. I don't know when this country one day can relook at the question of land. I think so that you can make some other things move. I think a situation should be created where land should be devalued so that it doesn't make, the competition for land in this country is becoming alarming. It is the rate at which people compete to get land is very alarming. And I think a situation might be created where the land can be devalued to allow such developmental matters to prosper. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the land which most of the parastatals occupy, most of these lands have been grabbed either by people who are serving in government, either by private developers, because, Mr. Speaker, like what my colleague said, the appointment of MDs and also the directors who serve in these parastatals are normally done by the state. And the people who are appointed here, Mr. Speaker, are those people who could have lost in elections or people who had actually helped certain governments to win elections. And these are people who come here merely not because of qualifications, mostly. Most of them just come here because they played a certain role during the campaigns. These are the people, Mr. Speaker, who can easily be influenced by the state. These are people who, when somebody serving in government, go to them and tell them to surrender certain things, especially land. Mr. Speaker, those people cannot resist because they are appointees of those particular state persons. Mr. Speaker, this idea of land, especially the recovery of land, we must create a situation where those parastatal bodies do not wish or do not want to push to get back their land, either because they collude with those people who grab those land, or probably because the court itself is reluctant to settle that matter once and for all. Mr. Speaker, we looked at several parastatals which lost land. And when you can see even in this report, we have got so many areas where these parastatals have lost their land, and nobody is dealing with it. Mr. Speaker, just like what we recommended as a committee, the CS for land should put caveats on the suspicious land or land where we know that it had been grabbed. When you look at most of the lands which are owned by parastatals like ADC and so many others, which we've seen here, KPC, KPLC, and all that, which of course some of them are not even in this report. Mr. Speaker, cases have been going on forever, and people have developed those parcels of land. You find somebody have built stories of houses, flats. Some people have built their own homes. And still, the case is in court. So I think courts must also up their game by actually putting caveats on those particular parcels. And the cases which are in court, Mr. Speaker, must be expedited, done away with, so that this land can be taken back by the state, I mean the parastatals which owned it. Mr. Speaker, the other issue also was titles. Like we found out, most of these parastatals do not have titles on the land that they believe or their buildings are in. These people should be given their titles. The land should be, actually the properties which are on those particular lands should be given titles. Another issue, Mr. Speaker, is the appointments, especially of MDs and the directors. Mr. Speaker, I think we need to put a law that these positions should be done competitively by by Public Service Commission, so that we do not have a situation where people are just being appointed by one person, no vetting is done. We can agree the state can appoint CSS and permanent secretaries, and those ones can be vetted by Parliament. But these others should go through serious, they should go through Public Service Commission so that we can get the best people who can work there and Kenyans who can work there. Mr. Speaker, there is a system which IBC introduced, and we are not happy about it. I wish they had introduced the same system on appointment of MDs to parastatals. Mr. Speaker, IBC introduced a situation where people apply online, especially the presiding officers and the clerks. They apply online, and they want to be appointed nationally. Mr. Speaker, that is the work of the returning officer in the constituency level. Why would they surrender their position to the national IBC? That should be done in the constituency level so that people cannot manipulate it. People from those particular areas can have. Mr. Speaker, that was just by the way. The other issue we looked at also is the land that these parastatals have, the over expenditure, which of course the MDs do, and the procurement procedures and the employment. Mr. Speaker, MDs and those people who serve in those particular parastatals.
Member for Kwanza.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity. And I want to support this report. But I think there are too many problems in parastatals, state corporations, and what have you. First of all, my observation here, and I quite agree with the recommendation made by the PIC, is like, for example, the budget. I happen to have been one of the CEOs of parastatals, 2 parastatals in this country. And in line with the regulations, the budgets are normally approved by line ministries, or at least there's a discussion between the state corporation that is involved with the line ministry. And apparently that practice is dead. It's not there. That's why we are having budgets that are not even budgets, but I think just somebody sits somewhere, the CEO and maybe the finance manager and a few other people sit and come up with a budget which they can't actually sustain. So I quite agree, the state corporation must have the budgets discussed with line ministry. The other thing that I'm seeing here is that I think most of these problems, Mr. Speaker, is the appointment of CEOs. I think CEOs are not being appointed competitively. And so we have these problems where either through nepotism or through political expedience, the CEOs are appointed and, some of them are not up to the task. They are not qualified, they are not exposed. And so we are having these problems. And I can tell you, if the trend continues the way they are continuing, the Speaker will have cases where there are a lot of problems in these parastatals. Okay, I've also had my colleagues in a hurry to appoint the boards. And so the CEOs and the management of that particular board actually can do anything. That's why we're having so many of these problems, because nobody checks on what's happening. So the appointing authority, the land ministries. We've had a case, for example, in the Department of Agriculture, where AFA is operating without a board, and there's no reason. You ask why they have not done that, nobody tells you why the board has not been appointed. So what's happening? I have no idea. Somebody somewhere, and you can't even now blame the CEO, and he'll do what he wants without the board, because nobody can check on him or check on her. And so there's that problem. And the other thing that I'm seeing, that I think has been actually highlighted by the committee, is the fact that some of these boards, some of these parastatals or city corporations, Mr. Speaker, have a lot of debts burden. Debt burdens for some of them, they are not able to meet up the obligations because the CEO, first of all, as I mentioned, are just appointed, they go there, there's no board. And so some of the problems we are seeing now, and I think it's been highlighted by the committee, is you find that even some of the interests are not surrendered. Because, every day, and I've had cases where even auctioneers invade, and I had a case when I was a CEO in the Lake Basin Development Authority. It was hide and seek, where you find you have debts, those actually trying to have the debts recovered, have auctioneers coming to you, and what happens? Some of these actually are some of the money that you see are used to bribe the auctioneers because they're always there looking for the debts. So most of these are multiple problems that are emanating from the fact that the structures in most of these parastatals are not properly laid down. So then we have this problem, and I think I've not seen this in the report, but in the office of the president, we have the department which is monitoring and state monitoring and efficiency unit, which again, in cases, I'm not sure, it could be compromised because some of these things be detected when they come around to monitor what's happening in the parastatals that are, like now you've listed 21 of them here. Most of them are just common things and should have been detected by this state corporation, the monitoring and efficiency unit in the office of the president. There's the sad situation. I, therefore, support the report.
Member for Nambale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me a chance to contribute to this report that has been laid before the House. I support the report by virtue of the amount of effort that goes in to attempt to understand what's going on in the parastatal sector, without which it would seem, just seeing what the reporter said, without which that would have become a rogue sector. Because despite the Auditor General's annual reports and the committee's consolidated reports every couple of years, it looks like the issues are continuing generally unabated. And I think that should be a cause for worry because the parastatal sector in many ways was supposed to be in sectors that are considered important to the nation, that are either strategic or would cause a major risk if they were let off to private hands, and therefore they are very important indeed, like the postal services, maritime services, and the many other services of that nature. Mr. Speaker, sir, it bothers me that in fact basic things that other employers have to cope with as a matter of priority, including, for example, deducting money from employees for tax payment, for transmission for tax payment, the National Hospital Insurance Fund, for example, the NSSF. These are contributions that are critical for, in the case of NHIF, in the event of illness, and this occurs almost in everybody's lifetime, And I've known people have had great hardship when they fall ill, and you now want to get an NHIF card, and they discover that, oops, there had never been any remittances, and the parastatal is holding onto the funds. I would expect, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the punishments here ought to be much, much severer than they are. Even if the funds are being retained to continue the operations of this parastatal, not remitting this kind of funds, putting lives in danger, like the case of an HIF, I think it needs to be punished, and punished very, very severely. NSSF, there are many times when people retire, they discover that in fact their contributions didn't even match, employers' contribution didn't even match the reduction they themselves had made through the employer. And for the average person, retirement time is the lowest time in your income flows. Because once you retire, you probably are going to make no more than, in some cases, 20%, 30% of what you're earning before. And if you find that your own savings in NSSF have not been remitted, this is really, really a major, major offense.
Order, Engineer Gumbo. Engineer Gumbo. Order. Yeah. You know, you are interfering with the concentration of the Speaker. Okay, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for the 5 minutes that I've taken there. So the punishments here are very severe. We know some governments, like in the US, which grind to a halt if budgets are not approved, literally. There's no reason why a parastatal cannot be brought to a halt because they have not, they don't have the funds. Perhaps they have mismanaged. And if it's lack of remittance from Treasury, then Treasury ought also to be accountable for it. Doctors have been on strike and nurses are on strike, putting lives to danger. And Kenya has continued with those huge losses. There's no reason why some of these parastatals should assume that they exist in perpetuity, even in the face of mismanagement. I think I like the report for hinting and showing the direction. I hope that the interventions that are proposed will be far-reaching, more substantive, and a lot thorough, because they look at the detail so that these parastatals don't get away with it. Mr. Speaker, sir, there are many people who have gotten very rich by entering government. One typical way in which they have gotten rich is to acquire properties that were in the first place public lands, for example, into their own names, and then finally sell back to another government parastatal government agency. I see here in respect of a corporation like the Postal Corporation, very, very Mr. Speaker, sir, one of the most stringent laws we have in this country, the Public Finance Management Act. In that law, it says that if you take interest, you should surrender it in many cases within 48 hours. It's amazing that supervisors and bosses and CEOs and boards should tolerate interest upon interest that is not refunded, so that it becomes a matter. Essentially, instead of going through the banking sector, they use the interest as a form of loan advances, which they know, as it happens in many cases, once they retire or leave that institution, nobody would follow. Sometimes people die and they say, we can't recover this because the person is dead. Nobody talks about the estate of the person that took the interest. I think this issue of interest is not small. It shows a fundamental weakness in the part of users of interest and managers above them to eschew the law by not enforcing what is otherwise a fairly straightforward matter. I think that some punishment that includes not just the user don't return interest, but the managers did not manage it well. And you can see clearly, in many cases, there is the weakest form of follow-up. Why? Because maybe the bosses themselves are culprits. But as a way of ensuring discipline in public finance management, where in the presence of the committee, when the hearing is on, they say, oh, but we have given the Auditor General. When did you give it? Last week. For an account here that's probably 2 years back. I think there is a general sense of laziness, I would say, but I think it is not laziness. It's probably much better than that. They are more shrewd. They don't provide the information in time, so it cannot be analyzed critically by the Office of Auditor General. It will go beyond Parliament with nothing but a slap on the hand, and there they would go. And in many cases, the misappropriation of funds can't be discovered in time because of that. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think that if we have to tolerate the parastatal sector, I say tolerate because there are many cases in which maybe some of them ought to be liberalized. when, especially if their mandate is no longer relevant. I think we need to rationalize that more so that resources can go into, we can put the resources into the productive sectors of the economy in ways that they are not going to be whittled away through bad governance. Mr. Speaker, sir, I know of a board of a major parastatal.
The experience that I have gotten is the one that is worrying, that this economy of this nation has a major effect on how we perform on the parastatals. And my experience is that poor management in most of the parastatals and delay in making crucial decisions, like in tendering systems, decisions on timely completion of those projects have cost this nation a lot of money, which in fact would have gone into more useful use other than paying variations due to pending bills. One of the other things that I have realized is that, Mr. Speaker, we need to strengthen our technical capacity, even in this House, because of the various reports that are brought. It is important to understand that it is not only financial side of the management of these parastatals, but also the technical. And as an engineer and who has also worked in the parastatals, I do realize, in fact, Mr. Speaker, that a lot of resources have been wasted due to poor technical capacity. And I do say this when I reflect, Mr. Speaker, on the, for example, like the collapse of the, now what you used to call the, the 1 meter gauge railway, which we now call AVR. Mr. Speaker, our experience looking at that parastatal, we realized how public resources, were disposed. Like we were not going to invest again in railway. And recently, this country had to put a lot of money in putting up SGR, which is a wonderful project for this nation. But if such a parastatal, if it was working well, maybe the investment in now SGR would be much less. But we cannot also forget, like the experience we had to go through in telecoms Kenya, how again, resources were just sold out to foreigners. But I think as we look forward, one of the issues that we need to make sure that happens is that we must have professionalism in learning of our parastatals. Appointment of top managers should not be on political grounds or no ethnic or any other interest. We must know that such organizations are important for the economy of this nation. I do believe that if these parastatals are not working well, that they drag the development of this nation. If they were working well, we could easily move much faster. I think the issue of that, of public funds, a conspiracy that starts from tendering system to execution to even litigations, is something that needs to be broken. And I think one of the things that we have also experienced is that there is no follow-through, like the report has mentioned, of legal processes to make sure that the interests of the public is taken care of. I think as we go forward, also it is important to develop capacity, particularly in the office of the Auditor General. I think we should provide resources adequate enough to make sure that the Auditor General's office provides the necessary staff and capacity to make sure that they follow up on these parastatals. I think it is important for all of us to know that when we are given a public appointment or responsibility, that we must do it not only for us, but also for our children. And I think the work that has gone into looking at all the reports during this particular time of this House, particularly by the public investment, I would want to say it's been a lot of work, and I thank our chairman for the leadership and for all my colleagues for the commitment to make sure that we set a new record of all the other reports that have been done by previous sittings of this House. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that Public Investment Committee is an important committee in ensuring that all this sector and of our economy is streamlined. I think it is important for all of us to make sure that the reports that have been done are looked seriously, the recommendations that are given, the necessary organs of the government to take action, and that those people who have been given the mandate to run these organizations should not. So, Mr. Speaker, I support, and I know that it's almost coming to the end of this time for this House, but I believe that there will be time for us to come back, and I believe I can do that with a very independent mind. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now I will call the mover to respond, to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to thank all the members who have contributed to this very important report for their kind words, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the prostatal sector is the engine, Mr. Speaker, to realizing a meaningful development, a meaningful industrial takeoff, Mr. Speaker. And without this sector properly and efficiently being run, Mr. Speaker, then we'll continue to have many sectors of our economy, Mr. Speaker, ailing, and therefore continue to lag behind in our development, Mr. Speaker, sphere, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are quite a number of prostatals that have, over the years, been making huge losses, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, at the expense of the taxpayers. Mr. Speaker, when we have interrogated this, we realized that the government also contributes to these challenges many institutions, many prostatals, Mr. Speaker, have faced. Mr. Speaker, the issue of appointment of CEOs at times is not done competitively, at times is not done professionally, at times is not done ethically, Mr. Speaker, and at times is done under the table, Mr. Speaker. If you really want to run a professional entity, Mr. Speaker, quasi-government agency, then the best you can do is to allow a competent and highly qualified CEO, Mr. Speaker, regardless of the ethnic, regardless of the political, Mr. Speaker, regardless of the regional background, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I remember in 1997 when I was first elected, I was appointed to the Committee of Finance, Planning and Trade, Mr. Speaker. And the first benchmarking visit we made was to Malaysia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at that particular time, I was a very young legislator, and I was excited to hear that Malaysia is one of the emerging economies, Mr. Speaker, one of the emerging economies, Mr. Speaker. And when I tagged and realized that there were a number of countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, South Korea, Hong Kong, a number of other countries, Mr. Speaker, and I reflected on how they really achieved that status, I realized that one thing that they did, and also immensely contributed to their rise, is because they have adopted a policy of zero tolerance, Mr. Speaker, to corruption. Mr. Speaker, this is one thing that is really lacking. Mr. Speaker, when we first visited, in that famous benchmarking visit, Mr. Speaker, we were trying to look at investments. We are trying to look at diversity actually from government-controlled prostatals. And Mr. Speaker, when we went there, and we had an opportunity to chat with a senior official of the Malaysian National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, the first document that we were given was a document that they borrowed from Kenya in 1974, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you can imagine the time lapse, the time lost between 1974 and 1988, Mr. Speaker. The same document is what they used to turn around their economy. Mr. Speaker, at that time, that Kenya was a donor nation, Mr. Speaker, a donor nation donating to South Korea, donating to a number of other struggle in economies, Mr. Speaker, at that particular time. Mr. Speaker, if truly we have to develop, because over the years we have talked about, we have bragged that we are a regional economic hub. Mr. Speaker, that title is gone. You only need to look at the recently released, the World Bank Economic Index, Mr. Speaker, where Ethiopia now has emerged as the biggest economic hub in East Central Horn of Africa, Mr. Speaker. And therefore that tag is no more. 4 years ago, every business activity between Kenya and Tanzania was in the favor of Kenya. Today, and give it another 2 years, unless we change, Tanzania will be the economic hub of the East African community, Mr. Speaker. Why all this? It's simply because we don't take what we do seriously. We talk and we don't implement. Mr. Speaker, in this particular sector has been seriously mismanaged. Boards are not appointed on time, or if they are appointed, colonies are appointed who do not have the requisite financial, technical, managerial expertise to run this organization, Mr. Speaker. In the process, they run down the organization. They just go there for meetings. They go there for allowances. They go there for trips. And they go there for other benefits. At the end of the day, 2 years down the line, the entity that was one of the most profit-making entities, Mr. Speaker, becomes one of the most despised, loss-making entities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, who contributes to this? The appointing authority. Who appoints? Is either the president, is either the minister, or is either the PS, or other corporate entities, other corporate also entities contribute to this. Mr. Speaker, I want just to take an example. Look at our NSF and the NSF of Malaysia, and compare it with the NSF of Tanzania, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the NSF that we have here today is not the NSF envisaged as a provident fund, Mr. Speaker. It's not. This is not the NSF that Kenyans really wanted. The NSF that we wanted, Mr. Speaker, this the NSF that we have today is a cash cow for the politically correct. This NSF, if the taxpayers, the contributors' funds, Mr. Speaker, were properly collected, properly safeguarded, this can become one quasi-government agency that even funds the other functions of the government, Mr. Speaker. Just like the Tanzanians are doing, Mr. Speaker. But what happens today? Year in, year out, we have an NSF that is controversy-ridden. We have an NSF that has become, another tag actually for corruption, Mr. Speaker. These are things that really we must deal with. Mr. Speaker, in terms of legislation, again, we have some of the best legal frameworks, Mr. Speaker, but they are not adhered. The other day, 2 years ago, the President, His Excellency the President, Mr. Speaker, released rules called the Mongozo rules, Mr. Speaker. Are they being followed? None. What happened to that famous report that we expected that would have collapsed, that would have merged so many parastatals into some key profit-making parastatals, Mr. Speaker? That again has been beaten. You know the reason, Mr. Speaker? It's simply because the cartels, Mr. Speaker, the entrepreneurs, the experts in looting don't want to see a vibrant, functioning, independent, profit-making parastatal sector, Mr. Speaker. Over the years, they have lived under this, Mr. Speaker. I'm afraid, even SGR, if you don't manage it properly, Mr. Speaker, and don't deal with, with the supporters ruthlessly, Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid, for a few years down the line, it might become another project, just like we have done with Kenya Airways, just like we have done with Mumia Sugar, just like we have done with Uchumi, just like we have done with Telecom, just like we have done with many other entities where the government decides, just like we have done with Kenya Railways, just like we have done with Rift Valley Railways Rail. These issues must be addressed collectively and head-on. That is the only way we can safeguard our title as a premier nation, Mr. Speaker, not only in the East Africa, which right now we have been, people are catching up with us, but in Africa, Mr. Speaker. This tag of being a premier nation, which our forefathers jealously fought for, we must stand for it, Mr. Speaker. Because it's our time as a generation. It's our time as leaders, Mr. Speaker. It's our time as National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, to stand firm and protect, Mr. Speaker, these entities, quasi-government entities that we have created, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at times when I've looked at this, I ask myself, are we really prepared? Are we really prepared to take this country to the next level of development, to the next stage, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other day you saw it. 2 weeks ago, and I'm privileged, Mr. Speaker, to have also served as a member of the Parliamentary Service Commission, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago, we advertised for some positions. You saw the queue, Mr. Speaker. I was shocked. I was shocked to see thousands and thousands of Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, queue outside Parliament in search for opportunity, Mr. Speaker. What does that tell you? It tells you the level of underemployment, the level of unemployment, Mr. Speaker, the level of desperation by our youth, Mr. Speaker. This is a challenge to the leadership, Mr. Speaker, of this country. And we must stand firm for the interests of the youth, Mr. Speaker, because a country that does not believe in the protection of this young generation, Mr. Speaker, then that country will never develop, Mr. Speaker. It is the youth who are causing monumental change, Mr. Speaker, when even it comes to voting. The other day, in the UK, you have heard what happened. Those who caused, Mr. Speaker, the unexpected are the youth, because they decide the educated, unemployed youth, Mr. Speaker. And those are the ones who will safeguard the interests of this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I really want to appreciate the sentiments of my colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I've had the privilege of being the chair of this very important committee, Mr. Speaker, and this, Mr. Speaker, I am not taking that for granted. I want to thank them, Mr. Speaker, for the confidence they have shown in my leadership. Mr. Speaker, I want to promise them that inshallah, even in the next parliament, and I do appreciate and also thank the people of Eldas and the people of Wajir West, because without them, we will not have been to this place. I am confident, Mr. Speaker, I'll be re-elected by the people of Eldas, inshallah, on August 8th, and we will be here, God willing, by the grace of God, to continue to contribute, Mr. Speaker, to the development of not only our legislative agenda, Mr. Speaker, but also to the development of this country. Mr. Speaker, one thing that we must do, this House is not a conveyor belt. Mr. Speaker, I want to add, for those who will be privileged to be appointed to serve in the Committee of Implementation, Mr. Speaker, must take their work seriously. And at the moment a report is passed, Mr. Speaker, is adopted by the House, that report must be actualized, that report must be domesticated, that report must be translated into facts, Mr. Speaker. That is the only way we can also really, Mr. Speaker, that is the only way as a House, as truly the democratically elected representative of the people, Mr. Speaker. And if you look at the provisions of Article 1, Mr. Speaker, when the framers of the current Constitution equated sovereignty to representation, Mr. Speaker, they knew the monumental task the elected representative of the people of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, have had, Mr. Speaker, have been given. And therefore, my plea is, let us change our status. Let us stand firm for the rights of our electorate, Mr. Speaker. And as I conclude this report, one of the things that, Mr. Speaker, we have endeavored to do as a committee is to clear the backlog. If you look at even some of the accounts, Mr. Speaker, some of the accounts date back 1988, 1999, 2000, Mr. Speaker. It was our desire. And those who will be privileged to serve in this committee in the next parliament, Mr. Speaker, will have their work cut out, just like the Honorable Kalwale did for PAC in the last parliament, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, for those who will join this committee, because for sure, inshallah, I'll be in the government. For those who will join this committee, then get ready. Your work is already cut out. And Mr. Speaker, as you will see, inshallah, tomorrow, we will do something unprecedented. We'll be tabling the wind-up report or the exit report of this committee, Mr. Speaker, so that those who will be privileged, who will be appointed to serve in this committee, will also get a diary of reference, Mr. Speaker, a booklet that they will use to refer to all the activities of this committee for the last 5 years, and I'm sure they will enjoy their time in the next committee. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the House, I beg to reply and urge the House to adopt the 21st report of the Public Investments Committee, Mr. Speaker, on the audited account of state corporations as amended, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, May 18, 2017, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. And at this point in time, I would have put the question. As I can see, obviously, we do not have the necessary numbers. So we'll proceed to the next order.
Order number 12, motion, adoption of session of paper number 3 of 2016 on the national housing policy.
We don't seem to have the chairperson, Transport, Public Works, and Housing. So that one will also be handled in the next sitting.
Order number 13, motion, adoption of the session of paper number 5 of 2016 on the national climate change framework policy.
Again, we don't seem to have the chair, Committee on Environment and Natural Resources.
Order number 14, the National Cohesion and Integration Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 11 of 2017, second reading.
Again, we don't seem to have the chair, Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, that also suffers the same fate.
Order number 15, motion, adoption of the reports of the Kenya delegation to the assemblies of the Interparliamentary Union, IPU, and related meetings.
Again, I do not, do you have any member who is moving this particular one? Again, same fate.
Order number 16, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment number 6 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 65 of 2015, second reading.
Yes, on this, it is supposed to be resumption of debate, interrupted on Tuesday, June 6th, 2017. And I see no member is interested in contributing to this one. So next, when it comes before the floor, it will be for the mover to reply. And order, members, order. We don't seem to have any other business left. And the time being 5:32 p.m., this House starts adjourned till Wednesday, 14th June 2017 at 9:30 a.m.